Hi everyone, today I will be sharing a tutorial on how to draw this river. The reference is from Ryan Thompson, who took a photo of a stream in the Glacier National Park, which I will loosely be orientating myself by. I'm starting with the HB pencil and I'm just mapping out where I want to have the basic components of the sketch. It is not going to be the cleanest sketch, but it just serves as like a rough orientation, so I can start blocking in the colors after. Sometimes I don't start with sketches, but it does help to lay it all out. Throughout this video you will notice that the light and the positioning of the camera and the iPad will change several times. In the end I did find a good spot to film, but the first couple of clips are not the best lighting wise. I wasn't actually certain to what degree I wanted to use the reference as a help or assistance tool to kind of find a composition or whatnot, and I think I started out pretty far removed from it, but then I kind of get a bit closer with some elements like the stones and by putting the log over. Similar to my previous videos, I will make a mixture of time-lapse and real footage in this video. I do want to show you how I paint in real time. However, this video got like up to 3 hours and I had to cut it all down and make it a bit faster and speed it up, so I hope that this works. Pause at any time and go back if you're painting along, and if you're just here to watch, then enjoy. In come the trees, and I will now continue to sketch some branches out just to see what kind of layout I would like. The backgrounds are super important for me, and I don't mean the entire picture, but the background of the background, because what happens is when you have an empty background or a solid wall of color or anything that looks really close, it does change the perception of depth in the painting. So I will show you when I start blocking in colors that the background is something I really try to focus on. Now I'm ready to start blocking in some colors. I will be using some brushes that aren't on Procreate, like the rectangular square brush that I mentioned in every video. I did get asked if I could put it up on somewhere to get for a sale or for, you know, for nothing. I am working on it, let's just say that for a minute, but I will put it up on Coffee eventually, or even on my Patreon just for nothing. But yeah, so we're going in with 2 colors, and this is where the light changes. I'm so sorry, but I just want to show you the steps I do in between this and the next video setup. So after blocking in the basic colors, I then go in with the old brush from Procreate that I've modified slightly, but I'm pretty sure that it would work as it is. And I start feathering out the shapes and also adding in different colors. Because this is the background of the background, I don't want to stick to one color only. So I've added 3 or 4 different colors of greens, and then I go in with the square brush again, and in a smaller version try and start painting in some shapes of the different foliage, branches and trees. It is all kind of figuring out. I am again not quite using the reference photo for this because I'm just kind of going in with my own details, but trying to see what kind of composition I want in the background, where I want light and dark to come together. After putting in some even smaller details, I take the old brush and I start feathering it out again, because if you look on the left, the photo does look quite soft. The branches and the leaf details aren't sticking out on their own, so I try to feather them out and add some more light and color to the front. To make light look light, I of course have to add some more dark, so I'm trying to get some more contrast in there. Yeah, I feel pretty good with what I've got so far, so in a minute I will go in with a smaller brush and I will start putting in details again, as you can see right here, in light and dark versions. Although I have to speed it up, you might see that I'm using the Procreate pen and I'm basically putting in blue little dots to mimic the backlight coming through. Usually when I start putting in the trees and so on and the foreground a little bit more and then colors from the foreground, I know what colors I'm missing in the background or where I need to put some more details in where, for example, the trees aren't in the front and it looks a little bit bare. And on we go to the river, which is one of my favorite parts, although I'm always a little bit nervous when I start with it. So for this is a technique I use usually. So you start with the lightest color, and then you put in on the side the darkest colors on the surrounding environment. And I'm not talking about the trees, but the leaves. And then we'll add some darker shades even later on, adding some more light where the reflections come in and so on, just with a very basic like brush. It can be any brush, to be honest, maybe one without too much texture, and adding in some more different saturated colors. What we're going to do essentially is take the old brush, or that's the one I'm using, and you use that in the smudge function, the tool, and essentially you draw down, you push down all the colors downwards and side to side in both like several times, and it kind of just creates this reflection by itself, and it looks super translucent to me, which I love. So that is always my go-to method for dealing with water. As you can see, I duplicated the layer first and I hid one of them because I want to ensure that if I don't like what I'm doing, I can literally just delete the layer and use the other one, start again. But here you can see it kind of coming together by pulling it down and combining the colors together. It just kind of gets really nice and watery. Using the colors from the reference photo next to me, I'm going to continue putting in the color blocking of the sidelines and like the area around the water. This is where the real advantage of layers comes to show, because for example with the water, I just painted that wherever I wanted. I used a clipping mask to put in the colors, and I didn't have to worry about the backdrop or the tree log in the front being covered because I can literally push it up like so. And similarly with this, the problem is once I get so many layers and details, I do lose track with them, but especially in the beginning, they are super helpful. I did want to leave some bits in real time, like I've mentioned, and the overall time of this painting I think came to 5 hours, I believe. I'm going to check that on Procreate in a minute, but it's okay, 5 hours for it like this. I usually take a bit longer. I was a little bit stressed because I knew that I had to finish the YouTube video on Tuesday, which I ended up not being able to do because the editing and phone storage just literally got in the way, but it worked out in the end. This might be a case of me not working smarter but harder, because I am literally blocking in the rocks. It's not black, it's a dark bluish shade. I don't think you can see that very well in here, but essentially I am putting down the opacity of the layer and then erasing where the layer overlaps with other things. And I mean, I could have just maybe lasso tool the whole thing, but I don't use lasso tool a lot, so I don't have much practice with it, and I just kind of go and do what I always do. But if you know a better way, let me know in the comments, because I'm always up for learning new things. Now I'll quickly clean up all the edges that I've missed and just make sure that there is enough color for the base ground, you know, the mossy colored bit next to the river, because there are some holes there I'm filling. Because the rocks are sticking out like these big black boulders, I am going to add some more color to this. I was looking at the reference photo to get a sense of what color I could use, but what I noticed was the color on the rocks in the reference photo was quite stark compared to the black that I had, or the darker color I had for the rocks. So I used a little bit of a lighter shade, I think it was like a brownish one, and I go over with the old brush and essentially just very loosely put in where the surfaces of the rocks are, trying to get a little bit of definition there and a bit of 3D kind of thing, which I feel like it worked quite well, which is why I love the old brush so much, because it kind of just does its texture randomly, but it always seems to work out in my favor when I do this stuff. Okay, not always of course, but generally speaking. I'm not sure how the old brush in Procreate is, because this is a modified version, but any texture tool, I know the stucco pen or brush in Procreate is also great for texture. I also use that all the time with rocks, so if you are kind of like not sure which one to use, try it out. But I would also encourage generally just to try out different brushes, because I also lack some texture sometimes, and just trying out different things, I kind of find a little bit of a style there, which I think is just, yeah, great for practicing and doing different kind of artworks. Here's a close-up of the rocks and the different colors they use. I'm going to use like a bluish kind of shade from the rocks where it just reflects the light, and the blue tone of the sky and the water, and I'm going to be using that to kind of put in a little bit of a different color variation into the rocks. I think you can't really go wrong with blue shadows, generally speaking, because if you have a blue sky or any blue surface in the painting, then blue will make absolute sense. Similarly for whatever other colors you have. So like my predominant color in this painting is green, and I will make sure to add some moss to my rocks, which is why I don't necessarily want to add it as a shading as well. But green, and then I have got a little bit of olive and a bit of yellow green in there. So because rocks often come in brown colors as well, some ochre colors or something in that direction, like a light orange tone would also work if you want to put in some highlights, for example. And something else I've learned is that everything that is in the back or everything that's in the shade has got a cooler color, and everything in the front has got a bit of a warmer color. So when you remember that in painting rocks, for example, then making the highlights a little bit more warm will make them stand out compared to the cool shade you used, for example. Okay, so next I'm looking at defining a little bit of the grassy mossy area in the front that is surrounding the rocks, making sure that they kind of fit together. I am trying not to use any different kind of brushes for grasses and stuff, simply because I want to learn how to do this by just kind of winging it with, being able to do this and being able to convert this skill onto a canvas would be my ideal way to do it, because I would prefer canvas painting to digital if I had the time and the energy to clean my brushes every time. But I just want to avoid getting used to something and then not being able to rely on it later when it doesn't exist in real form, for example. So I try to do most grassy stuff with a Procreate pen, a studio pen, and the way I go about it is essentially putting in the shading and making sure that I've kind of set on a few spots that are lighter. I want to have a river that is pretty steady and there is no wild rush like on the reference photo. I want to have like a calm one, so I don't need to worry about any water overlapping or anything like that. But I am trying to put down where is the light, where is the dark areas, and then going in with different colors and adding to that and kind of letting those two areas overlap a little bit. I have got the basic stuff in the front, and I want to make sure that the transition between the background and the foreground is smooth enough. Now I noticed that my trees were not really like touching, they were kind of leaving some holes, I guess, areas where I didn't draw the trees, and I just decided to stretch it out, and that worked for me. So I did that and tried to put in some grass in between those trees and the foreground. And now I'm going to come in with the stucco that I mentioned earlier, the brush, and I'm painting in some moss. Also here, trying to respect the shape I've already kind of defined with the lighter, darker colors, the second dark colors that I put in that are a bit lighter, and try to give it a bit more shape by not completely painting over it, so leaving some bits darker and some bits lighter. I think This is where I also learn not to try and just wing it and see what works, and like just paint it all and then take out whatever. Just trying to like carefully paint in and then adjusting as I go. I know that later on I will be able to come in with like lightings or blending modes and kind of push out areas of the painting that I want to emphasize. So I'm not too worried about that at the minute. Now this is unfortunately super sped up because when I let my camera go on time-lapse, it literally just adjusts the speed as long as I record. So what I'm doing here is I'm kind of working on the trees, and I'm also after going to work on the in-betweens of the leaves sticking out in the background. Those kinds of time lapses will come up again now in a little bit because I will be working on the background quite extensively. For the details, I usually opt for the Procreate Studio pen because it just kind of gives me clean, nice dots, and sometimes I use the old brush, a very small version, but not so much. I usually use that for bigger, more like when I try and feather things out and make them look softer because it's not a defined texture. I noticed when I use, for example, the hard brush from Procreate to do these little like dots and whatnot and brush strokes, that it kind of just blurs together, and I am not looking for that because when I put in this detail I want to make it look really high resolution because you can zoom in into the painting as far as you possibly can and still have everything clear, and that is the goal for me because it is just very satisfying to create. And it is real time this time, no sped up. It's just how long I take to paint this. I don't know, I had a comment on my Instagram the other day saying, oh, I love the brush textures and stuff, and I wasn't sure if they meant that they loved the brush textures, and they assumed that I was using brushes for these different little details, or if they meant the actual brush textures like the stucco and the old brush, the only ones I use at the minute. And I just kind of felt like, oh, interesting. I wonder if people assume that I'm using brushes for all of this. So I kind of try and be quite transparent about what I use and what I don't, because especially in these tutorials, when I want you to be able to paint something, then of course it makes sense for me to tell you what I'm doing. I wasn't sure if I should have left the audio in for this bit. I realized I was painting on the wrong layer and I just kind of like flipped. But the great thing is you can just kind of lasso tool it out, and then when you lasso tool it, you can select copy and paste, and it puts what you've lassoed into a different layer. Then you go back to the other layer, hide the copied layer, and then erase everything in the other layer that you've painted over, and essentially put the stuff right now that I've got there, moving it, basically putting that layer under so that you don't have to perfectly cut it out, but at the same time it is not on the same layer. So when later I'm going to do a clipping mask for the log that is across the stream, then I don't have to worry about painting the grass on the side with it by accident. When there's a part in the painting that is super detailed, I want to try and get that detail across the whole painting and not just have one bit like that. There is something about, in the artist world, about not putting too much detail in because it becomes overwhelming, but that is exactly what I love about forests, because if you go into nature, into a forest, there is so much detail, it is not possible to take it all in, and I I just absolutely love that. I am so mesmerized by it. I can stand there for hours and just look and find something new every time. Different textures, colors, patterns, plants. When you go outside maybe and have a look at the ocean, it is a little bit different because it's more of the same thing. There's not as much different details, structures and whatnot. It is kind of, depending where you are I guess, but it kind of feels like it is the same. While I love the ocean and the beach, I much prefer painting forests because I absolutely love that detail. So that is exactly what I'm trying to put into this painting as well. Again, using the studio pen to paint all the little details. I am using that and the HB pencil for really fine detailed grass, but for all of this bit, I'm literally just using the studio pen and kind of trying to let those areas overlap of the lighter and darker shades, and then simultaneously, I guess, also with the studio pen going into the background and adding more details there, more light and color. I really wanted to make it pop and kind of come out and look really alive. And I do feel like that worked, but there was something that was missing the entire time, and until the end I wasn't sure what it was. And to be honest, I'm not sure if most people would agree with it, so if you stick around to the end you'll see that I've painted in something else that kind of undoes all my hard work in the back, but you know, it kind of looked like right for me. But then I do a lot of stuff like that, so you'll see what I mean when I come to it. I'll explain it again later. Something that I also forget to do a lot of the time is to remember that perspective is everything. So in the back, the details will be super small and fine, and the more you come to the front, the larger the details are that you're painting. I mean, the large details can have details, like let's say you paint leaves and the back leaves are pretty small little dots, but then you come to the front, those leaves should be massive, and yes, those leaves can have details, but I guess it would be bigger, and I don't do that very much and often, and I do know that is something I need to remember, so I'm kind of just putting it out there for you if you are someone who also struggles with this. But you know, I still need to learn this, so I'm not here to preach, I'm just here to remind. Because the background is quite thick in foliage, oh my god, I'll never be able to pronounce it in English. I'm trying to add a little bit of like blue spots to get the light through again. I know I did that earlier, but just in this little bit, it does kind of work well. I think someone asked me what my favorite part was when I was painting, and they assumed that it was this part where I put in all the details. And I guess they are right. This is my favorite part, but at the same time, I couldn't specifically say which part is my favorite because just seeing it come together is so satisfying. You put in the hard work of like sitting there dotting the painting for hours but at the end you can just see it come from like a super basic blotches of paint to a rendering that feels 3D. And I know I've got stuff to improve, but I am happy with what I'm doing, so it is so satisfying. Although I do get the occasional night where I just can't paint. Whatever I do, it just doesn't seem to go right. And that's where my skills are lacking depending on what I'm trying to paint. I was trying to do a ruin the other day of a building, like an ancient ruin that was overgrown. And I wasn't able to paint it because the skills were not there. I hadn't practiced it before. And I got all frustrated and I thought, oh god, I suck at this. And then I went to a different one, the forest after, and I wasn't able to do that either. Some days just are like that. They are a bit weird. And the next day it feels like it comes back together. So I guess it is the nicest part, really, is seeing it come together. And the final touches when you know, okay, I just want to do this a bit and then this, and then you're done. And there is no time pressure. That is the most important part. Now I'm going to define a lot of different shapes, the leaves in the background and the leaves that come in front of the trees. And I think this is also where I struggled a little bit with the layers, because I ended up just painting on the layer above and then the layer above that. So I kind of mixed up where the leaves went and everything. I mean, I didn't sort it out, but it is a struggle. What can I say? But yeah, I will be doing this for a minute. If you are just watching and not painting, relax, chill out a bit, and I'll see you in a little bit because I will do some more voice recordings, of course. And if you are painting along, have fun. Something I definitely struggle with is finding the transition between the grass and the area around the water and the water. For some reason, it never feels quite natural to put the shapes in and to kind of have it like stop somewhere random. I'm not quite sure what it's about. Maybe it's practice or lack of practice, rather. So I've put in the lighter color of the background, so the blue I want to keep in, like as in the reference photo where there's a lot of light and blue reflected, but I guess I'm kind of trying to find where the ripples are and the shades. I'm going in with a bit of a darker one again, but what I also wanted to say with the light blue lines across the water, it is perfect to smudge those out with the Procreate Studio pen, to use that smudge studio pen, because it kind of just, you can push it all the way however you want to and it looks really smooth. But these colors that I'm putting on now, I will be using the old brush again, and I will be pulling them down like I did in the very first part of the water, just to give them some more color, a bit more body, especially when the light comes in. And the reflection of the light is the most important bit here, because, well, you can't have light without shadow, of course, and you need shadows to show that there's light areas, but I guess it kind of looks like it glows from inside, which is exactly the kind of thing I want to achieve. When pulling it down with a smudge brush and creating that like little mirror effect, I make sure that the brush or the tool that I'm using in the smudge thing, the opacity is low, because I don't want to pull it all away or make it go away completely, or completely like smudge it up, I guess. Okay, so having added lots of texture and colors, I am quite happy with this. I might add a little bit of shadows more later where the rocks are concerned in the water, but for now I'm going to focus on the front mossy areas on the stones, which is where I've used the Stucco and the old brush to do this, and now I'm coming in with the Procreate Studio pen, putting in details, and then using the old brush to feather them out, making sure that the old brush's opacity is low so that I don't smudge the whole thing. The great thing about that one is that it kind of disperses all the existing paint or ink on the painting, I guess. For the moss areas on the tree bark, I have also used the Procreate Studio pen to do these little details, but I also used the HB pencil to get in some details that are less opaque, I guess. Well, I want to have a little bit more texture, and the HB pencil does that very well, and it's also very thin lines, which is why I use it here for the grass and for like little leaves. Compared to the studio pen, I guess, these HB pencils or other pencils that I use for the small grasses have got a much thinner and finer feel to them. And so I kind of ended up using them across the whole grass in little bits and bundles. Not the whole thing, but because I wanted to add some variation and because it was a lot of work to do this already, so I just ended up putting in some lighter shades into the lighter patches, like here. Now that I'm kind of post looking onto the painting while I'm doing it, I realized that there is a lot of very similar colors in the foreground, and I think what I would do next time, and maybe as a tip for you, is to change the color hue slightly the more you come to the front. I think I should probably use a little bit more bluish green in the middle / background of the grass, and then come forward. The more you come forward, the lighter it gets, kind of thing. But because everything is kind of like this mossy green enchanted forest kind of piece feel, I did end up using very similar green in the whole thing. And I tried to correct it by using some different blending layers later, where I add light and different colors that way, or I accentuate those colors I've already have by adding like glowy bits and a bit of light shading there, and you'll see what I mean anyways. But that is something I might have to do next time. Use different types of hues. I will be adding a little bit more sparkle to the water eventually, and then start on the light. So for the light, I did first use like a square rectangular brush to put in that white bit in the background, and then I ended up using a medium hard airbrush to kind of feather it out with some warmer colors. So the actual fog in the background is white, and then I went in with yellow and yellow green light tones to kind of give it a bit more of a pop or warmer feel. And then I made sure to add a little bit of that light reflection in the grass around it. Now this is kind of where I've already added a little bit of light, and I'm adding more light. I'm not just talking about the different kind of stuff in the grass, but I'm using the airbrush to put in a lighter shade of yellow and stuff. I believe I was using the add blending mode in layers on Procreate that just kind of, it brightens everything you do kind of thing in that layer. So if you're using bright tones, you're gonna get nearly white tones and stuff like that, so it kind of just saturates it a little bit like that and puts up the brightness. But in the end I noticed that the front had too much of that blending thing over it, and I took a little bit away because especially on the rock in the front it just looked too saturated. But in the back it was really helpful to kind of just make the emphasis on the light a bit larger. Of course, I have to add the signature Fireflies and fairy lights because that is literally the thing that made me start all of these paintings in the first place. The little fairy lights. I used to have children's books with them and I just absolutely adored them, and I just wanted to be surrounded with them in the glowy light and the feeling of safety and warmth and love, and that kind of embodies what they are for me. To be honest, sometimes people ask me if I could try and add some more creatures to my paintings, and I agree, eventually I will probably do that. But for me, it feels like when I add these little fairy lights, the whole painting kind of comes alive because it feels like there's movement in the air, but also because I feel like those fireflies or fairy lights or glowing orbs, whatever you want to call them, they add so much life to it because they are life. So yeah, now we are getting to the controversial bit. Now this is kind of where I realized there was something missing in the painting and I wanted to really add some more contrast to all the light I created. So I went in with the old brush and just went in with like black, literal black that I hadn't even used on the rocks. And I ended up just putting it over and just trying to see what works best. Did it look like branches and leaves or did it look too much? I am really happy actually with the end result of that. I mean, I will show the end result in detail at the end, of course, but it might look a little bit weird now. But also, if you are like, let me know what you think. If you think that the black is completely out of order, I feel like the contrast is great, but also all the detail in the back, of course, is kind of like pushed away. Maybe that's a good thing, I'm not so sure, so let me know what you think if you do have an opinion, if you made it this far even in the video. I know this is like forever long, so if you're still here, you are an absolute legend, and I really mean that because 45 minutes nearly is pretty damn incredible. I did experiment a little bit with trying to add branches and stuff, but I ended up leaving that out, I believe, because it did look a little bit weird. I wasn't too sure what I was doing. Okay, now for the close-ups. So essentially I added a little bit of light to this orange light, and as you can see the camera takes it quite saturated everything, which I can assure you it is not, but it's very difficult to show you how it looks like with a camera and an iPad. I was contemplating of making a print, but the time slipped away, literally. But here you can see all the details. Excuse my hand, please. It's right in the middle. And yeah, I've got a couple of like, this is my favorite part, by the way. I love this. But I have got a couple of videos coming up now where you can see the difference with and without the black leaves in the front, and with and without the lighting that I added. So here's it without the dark leaves, and then I add them. Which do you prefer? To be honest, I still feel like I'm not sure at all which ones I prefer because I just don't know. And then this is with and without the light. And turn the opacity down and up. Let me know what you think. Okay, thank you so much for watching this and for supporting me. If you enjoyed it, leave me a comment, a like, or share, or subscribe, whatever you feel like. I really appreciate any of those, and I'm really excited to do some more of this stuff. So the more you guys let me know what you think, the more I'll do of the things you like. So that is kind of how it works for me best. So yeah, I know it's Wednesday, not Tuesday, but I will do my very best to see you guys next Tuesday again. And have a lovely week. Take care.